Hello, my friend. Before we jump into today's episode, I just want to give a quick shout out to our Business for Unicorns Instagram account. Honestly, we're crushing it over there. We're sharing snippets from this podcast, clips from our YouTube channel, and really what I think are top tier tips and advice straight from our emails. So if you're not following us over there yet, head over to Business for Unicorns on Instagram right now and click that follow button. You won't regret it. All right, let's dive into today's episode. Today, I'm here with my non-sexual life partner and leadership guru, Mr. Mark Fisher. And we're talking about the biggest mistakes we've made as leaders and what we do differently if we had a do-over. So we're pulling back we're crawling through the sands of time and going back through some of our early leadership mistakes at Mark Fisher Fitness and telling you what we would do differently. So it's a one part therapy, one part tactical advice for all of you. Let's dive in and get into it. Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. I'm back here with Mr. Mark Fisher. How are you, sir?
I am doing very well, but it's late afternoon. I can't figure out the lighting. So if you're watching this on YouTube, for the 4 people that don't listen to the podcast, you'll see very dramatic Rembrandt lighting.
It is very, it's kind of,
that's what that is. Rembrandt lighting is what it's called.
I was going to say, it's kind of Hitchcockian in the way, like, you know, they're going to someone's going to come out of the shadows with a knife.
Lighting for videos. Yeah, it's
how to make it as dramatic as possible. I love it. We're recording this kind of in mid-summer. How's your summer been?
It's good. It's good. Yeah, got some more travel coming up. Going to go up to New England, hit the Berkshires and Maine with the wife and baby, and take a couple weeks, and then reluctantly go back to Burning Man. Not reluctant. I'm happy to go, but I'm last minute going because I have some dear friends. I think it's end of an era. So
everyone goes to Burning Man.
Listeners that don't want to hear about it anymore.
Everyone who goes to Burning Man does talk about it like a kind of a blessing and a curse, right? It's like work, but like so worth it, but also work.
Yeah. It's a really love hate. I mean, it's a crucible. It's like maybe more understandable to a lot of listeners of the Fitness Biz podcast. It's kind of like an ultra marathon, right? It's like it's sort of beautiful and amazing, but it's kind of hard. It's also like super fun in many ways, and it's not everybody's preferred flavor of suffering, but historically it's been mine. And I think that window is starting to end. And for future summers, I hope to do just more family oriented things until Celestia is old enough to want to go at the age 6, 7, 8, at which point I feel I will be obliged if she
have to make it a whole family trip. Yeah, of course.
It'll be a very different trip at that point, but particularly because my wife Sheena will not go.
No.
Which I'd be happy to do. Yeah, we go, and it'll be a burn for me for sure. But
that'd be amazing. Well, let's dive in. Today, what we want to talk about is actually a little bit of just a kind of a backward glance, and you and I are both reminiscing about all of our years at Mark Fisher Fitness and all of the mistakes we made. And today, we want to talk a little bit about mistakes we made as leaders, right? Leadership mistakes, things that we wish we would have done differently, things in hindsight that were lessons staring us in the face. And, you know, this could be probably, at least for my part, a 9-hour podcast, but let's just keep it high level at ones that we think are maybe most useful. Do you have one that you want to start with?
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of have like one big one and then maybe a bunch of different variations of it. But I think the biggest thing that I could have done better in general was set expectations, right? And I think before I give like a little color on like what I mean by that is, the first thing I'll say is, you know, this also partly was inspired by, I did a webinar on Thursday for leaders and managers in the fitness industry. And I love this content. I think it's super important. I think people don't talk about it enough because mostly they just want to talk about leads, which are important too. Yeah. You know, it's funny, like and I found myself as I'm doing it the whole time. Whenever I talk about leadership, I'm like, it always feels like not hypocritical, but I'm always aware that like it's the Hemingway quote for writers that there are no masters and we are all forever apprentices. Like, it's how I feel about leadership, because it's so contextual and based on the person, and like you're just not always going to get it right. And not only that, you can only learn so many things through books. And God knows nobody tries to avoid problems by reading books, but like leadership is like you learn it in the world with the reps, right? And I think like net, I did do probably like a lot of things right, but I think for the topic of this podcast, it's more interesting to consider the things you maybe would have done a little bit differently. And I think in general, one of those things I just didn't know how to do in the beginning was set expectations, right? And, we can drill down on that in a number of ways, but like very specifically, like when I was like training people in the beginning, I remember not really knowing how to tell them what they needed. And for some employees, I was fine. Brian Patrick Murphy, I gave a yellow legal pad and I was like, go figure it out, buddy. Right.
Yeah, of course.
On the other hand, poor Stacey Jackson, I remember like actually bursting into tears. I was trying to train her because I just didn't know how to tell her what she wanted. And, I think she would say if she was here, like she does best when you make it really clear to her what winning looks like. And what I came to understand was even people that are big picture, they're rarely going to be a Brian Patrick Murphy. Even the people that like a certain amount of freedom in the beginning really want to know what winning looks like.
Sure.
The other one I'll share briefly and then open up for, your thoughts and experiences with that or whatever else you have is I think setting expectations for career opportunities. I think the biggest
it's another big part of it
that led to some issues, right? And I recently found out about somebody that had worked with us in the past that I know didn't leave in bad terms, and we're still like friends. We still see this person regularly, but I know felt not amazing about it. Was feeling, to put it dramatically, that they were sold a bill of goods. And I don't think they're entirely wrong, because I think the first couple of years at MFF, we also talked how relevant this is to everybody. But like, if you happen to be an actual call leader and you can really get everybody to light their underpants on fire and quit their jobs and move across the country, potentially one of those challenges are if you run a gym, it's not like Google. There's not like unlimited opportunities for growth and development. And there are some people that do really well that want like an awesome job that's pretty consistent and they'll make like a little bit more money over time, but they like that. But people that really want to have massive amounts of growth and opportunity, that is tricky because the business needs to, first of all, be growing at the right speed to allow those opportunities. And gyms, tend to not grow, and definitely number one. And then number two, that person also has to have the skill sets to be able to handle whatever opportunities they're asking for. And that there's always sometimes a mismatch there where you have the person like, oh, this person could do X, but for any of the reasons they don't want to. And this other person really is like ambitious and adamant and really talking a big game, but they can't answer their emails. So anyway, I'll pull up there. But I think that for me, the big thing I've learned to do is the more expectations I can set from the front, the better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I feel like that resonates with my memory of that, and also other jobs similarly. Because I think the thing that you described so well is how expectation setting for new employees in any leadership relationship is tricky, because different people need different things, right? So there's no one approach to onboarding employees that's going to work for every employee. Some employees really like give me a direction and get out of my way. Some employees really like give me step-by-step instructions for how to do each thing. Some employees really like hold my hand. Some employees really like leave me alone, right? So, they need different things. That also goes with other parts of the job. Like some people really like a clear growth ladder. Tell me what it's going to take for me to get to the next job or to the next pay scale or to that. And some like to live in the moment. They're not so concerned about that. In some cases, we overshot and maybe overpromised jobs or growth in a business that maybe never came to fruition. But I think for many of our listeners, they probably do the opposite, right? They actually don't think enough and promise enough about what growth is possible and how much money you could make or what the opportunity is at their gym. And so I don't say all of that to let any of us off the hook for not trying our best, but to say that is a moving target, by definition, a moving target. And it's tough because different people need different things. I think a really good expectation setting process does its best to meet each person where they're at. And we just certainly didn't know enough about what we didn't know to know how to do that as well early on. And, even now knowing, I think what we know, it's still tough. It's still a tough needle to thread.
Yeah. I'm certain it's still not perfect all the time, but when I think about like in my own experience, I needed, like, it really started to change. And this is maybe another tactical takeaway for listeners. At least my experience of this, and it's possible, by the way, that people just started being not candid with me because, by 2016, I was no longer this young punk kid hotshot. I was this like, older, semi-scary industry figure. But I think I also just was doing a better job by that point, because the other thing that happens is when you have team members, and Lord knows MFF had over 100 employees, right? You just keep getting reps. You keep learning things, being like, that could have been clearer. So you if you're paying any attention, you're going to just get better over time. And what we wound up doing was codifying essentially this culture onboarding, and in general, beefing up onboarding, right? Because if we're talking about specifically the onboarding situation, we always say like our playbook for this, without giving you like all the weeds, there's a lot of like useful stuff in there, is, The good news is you're going to have probably between 20 to 80 hours, right? You're probably going to need at least 20 hours of training, and then you probably don't have more than 80. Maybe you get 3-4 full weeks, but for most gyms, you don't have that luxury. So you don't have an unlimited number of hours, and you probably have 1 to 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks if they're doing it super part-time while they're doing another gig. And then you have maybe another 90 days when they're officially onboarding and they're getting extra love, care, and attention. And when we're talking about the actual onboarding itself, you can take those 20 to 80 hours and then you just figure out how to chop up the pie, because out of that time, a lot of that is going to be training the functional role. You're going to need that. You're going to need maybe 30 to 60 minutes to just do like boring HR stuff, right? Here's how you log in your email. Here's how you get in your booking billing platform. Let me take your canceled check for direct deposit. Let me say it's set up in the payroll, et cetera, et cetera. And one thing that we did, and you might not need or want to use 3 hours of this, but I think we were doing 2 different 90-minute work sessions where I would do this one-on-one, even after I was mostly out of the operations, to try to do my best to set expectations for the onboarding on the macro, but also have intensive conversation around what is the history of MFF, what is our mission, what are the values, what do they mean in action, and then try to really engage people in the dialogue, right? So because this isn't, optimally you coming down with the stone tablet and like, listen to me, employee. You're trying to engage them after they've reviewed this information on their own. Which of the values feel most resonant for how you naturally move in the world? Which of these values represent one that's a little bit harder to get your arms around, right? And part of that, I think, as you mentioned, also is setting expectations for what's going to happen professionally. So we've talked about this before, about the way MFF came to do it. And even at CSP, where I think you sign a 1 or maybe 2-year agreement, and then the expectations you go. And what's great about that is if you decide to stay, that's great. It's a bonus, but it's not an expectation of like year 4 or 5 where the trainer starts to get, kind of resentful about like, what's the next thing? Because you didn't make it clear, like, look, this is not going to grow indefinitely. I'll continue to pay you some more based on the value you create and based on some inflation. And I hesitate to say, but I almost feel like you can almost get away with like anything as long as you're very, very upfront that that's like what's coming, because of all emotion is interruption of expectation. So
I was going to just pretty much reinforce that same point you just made, which is I think a lot of people struggle here to set clear expectations because they feel like it requires them to like have some sort of crystal ball into what's happening in the future, and you really don't need to have some sort of magic wand to know exactly what's going to happen to this employee in the next year or 2 or 3. But what you do need to do is be as clear as possible about what you do know and as clear as possible what you don't know. I think if you can just be super honest about the things you can control and what you do have power over deciding in the short and long term, and what are the things you actually don't have any plan for at all, right? And just letting the employees know, actually, I don't have a plan for that. No one's ever been here that long. No one's ever, at one point, no one had ever had a baby here. We don't know what our paternity leave is. At one point, we needed to make one, but if someone had asked us in the first few years, I wouldn't have had one because we didn't, right. And so I think just being honest about what you know and honest about what you don't know is the best anyone can do at any given moment. So, you don't have to see into the future. But I think that's a really good one. I think that's a really clear part of expectation setting is that there's a cultural part. There's a part about who we're trying to be in the world, who we are as a brand, who we are as a team, the values we're showing up with. And I think that's an often overlooked part. People often get into the mechanics of the job and forget to talk about the kind of way we all want to be together and the thing we're aspiring to create. I think it's an important part. It's really important part.
It's one thing I've been thinking about recently too, is this is like a completely stupidly imperfect model, but I'm like finding it useful. Is I've been thinking a lot about like there's like the short-term development and like there's the long-term development. There's like the weekly meetings and then there's like the quarterly annual meetings. There's the training on the SOPs and how to coach a deadlift and the tenets of your customer service standards. And then there's the conversations around it's 2 years from today. You're still working here. What needs to happen for you to be thrilled and on fire, right? And the tactical stuff for onboarding, like that's a lot of like what you got to do, or you got to teach them how to block and tackle. You got to teach them how to open up. You got to teach them how to, depending on what their role is, like, again, assuming it's trainers, a lot of you have trainers. It's like, how does your business teach deadlifts, right? What are the standards for how they run a session that gives them wiggle room to be human within the system, but also to be systemized enough that things are consistent? And I think that's also a great time to really help them understand what the shape of the next couple of years might look like, which, to your point, can include the buckets of the things that you don't know and just sort of being honest about it. I think I also get to my defense in the beginning, and maybe some of this will save you some arrows in the throat. I just didn't know what I didn't know.
Sure.
And at that time too, we were reading like books about like delivering happiness, and we were basically only, because the thing is, when you write a business book, you're not writing it for a small business, right? You're writing it for the Fortune 500 company that you're going to hopefully get a consulting gig with. And because of that, the companies that we tried to model, and by the way, this actually really worked well for us in many, many ways, because we did a lot of things that were very unusual to the space and, probably aren't going to get done other places. But, we really tried to think as big as we could about the cultural piece and about taking care of the team. And Lord knows we didn't do it right all the time. Yeah. But obviously, it wasn't Zappos. We didn't have the budget for an exorbitant library where people could go. We didn't have like a resident like therapist and life coach on staff, right? There were some limitations to some of the Silicon Valley startup culture stuff that just wasn't available to businesses of our size.
Yeah, those are all good ones. I'm trying to think of, I have a million mistakes swirling in my head that I made. I'm trying to think of the one or two that would be most relevant. I think the one that comes to mind that we haven't touched on yet that I know was a big do-over I would like to have is one of the things that good leaders and managers, and that for that matter, do is they help people decide what everyone should be focused on. They help the team collectively and individually decide what's important, what gets our attention, what doesn't get our attention. And that's something early on I don't think I was very good at all. I think because I didn't know what my job was from day to day. We were all kind of making it up as we went. I'd never been in a position of building something from scratch. And I think neither of us, I think the good things about us together is that we both went into this with the confidence that we'll figure it out.
Yes.
And so I wasn't afraid to touch, every area of the business, even the fitness stuff that I had no experience in. I was not afraid to dive into it. But because of that, I think I had my eyes on too many balls. And because of that, I steered the team in too many directions, down rabbit holes of things that were not important. We spent a lot of time majoring in the minors when we probably should have been zooming out and focusing on just like the big picture of what matters most. Lead generation, sales, something we didn't really have to focus on early on, but probably should have been. Building capacity of our managers and people earlier on, didn't really focus on. Spent too much time on lots of things I shouldn't have. So, I think the place where the tide turned for me, and I think for us, I think you'll probably agree with this, is, and this is probably the takeaway for many of our listeners, is when we started using EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, which wasn't until much later, and we did a few things like it earlier, so it's hard to remember exactly when this was.
Yeah, it wasn't that we were doing nothing. We just
no. It was just like I felt like it. Oh, I wish I would have started this sooner. I wish I would have had this kind of focus for myself and for my team and for the business sooner. Was when we used EOS, and for those of you listening, I think you all know we have a version of this Entrepreneur Operating System for gym owners that we call Frameworks for Unicorns. It's very similar, but scaled to gyms. And it's a system that helps you get clear on what are your projects for the year, what are your goals for the year, to break that down into kind of quarterly projects or rocks. And that leads into like a weekly meeting that, they call the L10 meeting. We have a version called the Mission Control meeting. So, right. But all of this is a system by which you run the business. And the system is designed to help you stay focused on what matters most and not distracted as little as possible. And I think early on, I was just distracted. There's a lot of shiny objects, a lot of problems that need solving. Yeah. I spent an inordinate amount of time on things that didn't matter. And I think because of that, people on the team were frustrated by me and what was on their plate, what was constantly evolving on their plate. And so I think, looking back on that now, I wish I would have been able to find the focus I needed to help them find the focus that they all craved. And I think I do a better job of that now.
Yeah, I think so. And, ideally that is part of the, value we can provide if you choose to work with us, is like, we took these arrows in the throat. So everything from like the mission control system meeting to how we do quarterly planning to even the one-on-one, meeting agendas that we use, like the system, just like it makes it, like any good system, it makes it much easier to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong thing, because absent some sort of like weekly, monthly, like however you want to do it, like a moment where you step out of the business, again, this sort of like grotesque model of like, there's the day-to-day stuff. And then you have to periodically pop up like a meerkat and be like, all right, where are we at? Where are the things?
What's coming around the corner? What's on
you
the
just
line?
kind of need some system to organize that, because of course the essence of strategy is all the things that you're not going to do. And part of the value of a lot of those systems are they also bracket the team and spare them from entrepreneurial distraction, right? Or sort of like, Mark coming 100%. Home from the event, like, I just read this new book. Hey, we're going to do this. It's a loyalty program. We'll just do this, And again, it's not even those ideas are bad, but it can
just give them whiplash, right?
It's psychic stress to them. I always say, like, the metaphor I always use is like, you're driving a long, windowless, creepy white passenger van. They're in the very back, and you're at the front driving. So it doesn't seem like a big deal to you. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to get some coffee. And you just like turn. And in the back, they're all like, whoa, because they're dealing with so much centrifugal force. It's sort of like you don't get car sick, as you know, Keeler, you don't get car sick when you're driving. If you're in the very, very back of the bus, if you're at all predisposed to car sickness, it's going to hit you harder there.
Yeah, I think that's it. And actually, you started hinting on the other thing I was going to share. I think we still have time, maybe a few more minutes here, which was, I think the other thing that I wish I had to do over with too, from early years at MFF, was really just kind of managing the emotion and energy of the team, right? We had a team that was full of energy and passion and emotion. And at times when I'm faced with that kind of, I don't know, I don't want to label them anything good or bad. It just kind of is what it is. But those are kind of like acts of extroversion, right? And the big swings and feelings and emotions, something that, I'm famous for not having. I think my kind of quietness or steadiness, I don't know, I think in many cases people told me it was actually a useful anchor. And in other cases, I think for people on our team, it made me come across as not caring. It made me come across as like smug or indifferent, to what people's, emotional experience was. And it's part of why I started doing coaching and have gone on down the road I have, right? It's because I realized, I actually want to be really good at helping people manage their emotions and feelings and mental health at work. But I know I sucked at it for a while, right? Which was, people coming in with big thoughts and big feelings and big emotions, and me being a pretty steady, not a little highs and lows kind of person. And I didn't really fully appreciate the, how that would impact others, right? Like my steadiness would not actually be a positive thing for other people, that for some people, they would interpret that as me being, like I said, not caring or smug or indifferent. And that's something I totally regret in hindsight.
Yeah. It's so hard, right? Because that particular piece, and this is probably like a good one to end on, because
it's going to be becoming therapy, so we should rate it.
But I think it is a good takeaway, because I think it's in Kim Scott's Radical Candor, which is like a very cliche book to mention, but I think it's a good book. And one of the points she makes is a lot of people, and this happens for a lot of gym owners, they're like, to be honest, I can't say I've had this conversation, but I imagine it could happen to a lot of gym owners, where it could seem as if you're like, why do I keep talking about emotions? This should just be about do the work. Just do your job. Why do I keep talking about the feelings? And that book, her credit, she keeps being like, that is your job, your whole job.
100%.
Because if you're not managing their emotions, you're not managing their energy, you're not managing their work output. So even if you're an evil Machiavellian capitalist, you have to manage that, And it's, I think, some self-awareness is valuable too, because of course, as leaders, we need different things, right? I'm obviously on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? For me, it just costs so much capacity because I care so deeply. Like, I don't think there's a worry that I don't care, but I remember when we were opening up Bowery, we were opening Bowery, you and I were getting food and Bowery was being opened up. And you told me something to the extent of, it was something, but it sounds like nicer. It was nicer in the way I'm making it sound, but you're like, they really get annoyed when you make them feel like you're wearing golden handcuffs, right? Because like my own emotions was such, which is interesting in a podcast we'll do in a minute. Because I am so like sensitive, that the cost for me was so high. And, again, that maybe has some benefits. No one can ever accuse of me of not caring, but that you're also in the blast radius if you have a leader that feels overwhelmed, where, they don't have, you don't feel particularly safe because, and I don't want to make it sound like I was like a mess, like it wasn't like I was like completely like unhinged, but in practice, I had to learn, and it took me a long time to do this. And to be honest, I don't know how even great I ever got at it, because so much of my work the past 6 years has been on my own, like had to learn, like again, on the one hand, we're saying like you have to, emotions are safe at work and be you. But I do think as a leader, you do have to like really check yourself. And if you really want to be effective, like there's also somebody said for like, if you're, opposite of Keeler, if you're more like me, learning how to play it a little bit closer to the vest. Again, I'm not saying be disingenuous or manipulative, but I do think like you have a bigger impact on people because your behaviors are so loud. And it took me a long time to learn how to regulate myself. And part of that, I think, also was just like reps. I think I just didn't have experience, and I had to. It was when you got big feelings. I've had to. It's taken me a few years to learn how to ride my internal unicorn.
Well, that's it. I think we both have just a very different ends of the spectrum in terms of like our neurobiological toolbox, right? In that you're very open and porous, and the emotions are spill out on your sleeve. I'm the other way. I'm a little more steady and reserved, and I think we just have to learn how to play with that hand, right? So for me, it's like people might think I don't care, so I have to find other ways of showing them I care, because I'm not going to be standing up and giving like a tearful speech at a meeting. That's not going to be my approach. So I have to like say things like, I actually really care about this, because otherwise people might think I don't, right? But I didn't know that, right? And I was never closed off to conversations about feelings, emotions, right? It was just that I think people got my energy and the way I was in a room maybe gave people the impression that it was not trying to give, right? I've learned that, and so now I could do things differently. Yeah. Let's pull up here. How do we recap this conversation? I mean, let's start with the recap of like, listen, y'all, you know this from listening to this podcast by now, that we're not perfect. We've made lots of mistakes. And I think I think the reason that we're here running Business for Unicorns is because we've tried our best to learn from our mistakes and make those moments of like, oh shit, I wish I had a redo on that. Okay, well, I do have a redo on that today and every day moving forward. So what do I do differently? What do I need to learn? What skills do I need to develop? Where do I need to look inward or outward at myself and try something new? And I think if there's any meta lesson from this conversation, it's like, we hope you're doing the same, right? You're going to fuck up in ways that are similar or different than us today and in the future. And we hope that we continue to use those as opportunities to grow and learn.
Yep. Get the reps in, people.
Get the reps in. Anything else you would add to wrap things up here, Fisher?
No, just I think it's a damn honor to do leadership stuff. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I do think this is really in our wheelhouse. I think there's a lot of things that we can be valuable to, but if you ever want help with the leadership piece, I'm fond of saying, I think leadership or sales, and there's like a leads leadership thing I haven't come up with. There's some fun to say about leads leadership. The leads, getting the marketing piece is not without challenge, but ultimately it's not complicated. There's not an unlimited number of ways to do it. Leadership, I think, is a little bit more challenging. And once you have a sufficient amount of like marketing gas and a sufficient amount of active clients and active lead flow, the whole game is the people stuff, right? Because it's the people stuff with your clients, it's the people stuff with your team.
And there is an unlimited number of ways to do it, because there's unlimited combinations of people.
You're never going to be bored.
Yeah. Well said. I think there's something in that for us to think about, because I think there's a paradigm or a framework there. But awesome. Well, thanks as always for the great conversation, Mr. Fisher, and dear listeners. Great chatting with you. Hope you have a good rest of your day. We'll talk soon.
Bye.